going with last week's podcast and now this week, man. Just the topics keep adding up. So let's get into this, dude. I'm excited.
Right, so let's start off top with the recent news, which Alex Grinch going on the Zooms to talk with media, literally just got done like a half hour before you and I started talking. And there were a couple of things that he talked about that I wanted to bring up. And the first one was the guys that he chose to highlight and his philosophy behind the guys going away, because I've always been interested in how does a coordinator go about talking to his players 1 year after he's had them in his system. What does he expect? So I'm going to read this quote aloud and we'll dig into it. I've been very pleased. One of the challenges to our guys, as well as we told these guys, we don't want to coach the same dudes we coached in 2019. Don't ask us to coach the same guys. So if you come back here with the same issues or any of the same flaws, you haven't taken advantage of your time away. You haven't taken advantage of the meetings. You haven't taken advantage of the walkthroughs and our time together once we got back together. And then he went on to highlight the guys that he thought were actually taking advantage of that. And at the top of the list is one Brendan Radley-Hiles. That'd be Bookie. Yeah, man, you know that I'm a Bookie truther. But, how do you take how Alex Grinch feels about Bookie?
I think that, honestly, it's been shown to me through actions more than words that Grinch, he really does like Brendan Radley-Hiles. I've seen the guy constantly pick Bookie's mind after he comes off the field. And I think, quotes aside or not, I feel like this is a guy who, he just gets ragged on so much, right? And I feel like it's exciting for me to see Grinch not only say hey, this guy is really going the extra mile and he's trying to do everything possible to get better. But he's saying that and then he's putting it into action by trying to make this guy a leader, trying to make this guy part of his plan in game action or in practice. And so for me, I feel like the Brendan Radley-Hiles relationship is fascinating, and it's one that's definitely going to pay off if and when there's a season this year. I personally know that obviously you're a big Bookie guy. I really like the guy as well. And I just feel like he's gone through the ups and downs that any young college football player is going to expect. It was just that pedigree before he arrived on campus that kind of caught up to him. And so going into this year, now that he's a quote-unquote upperclassman, and Alex Grinch has said, look, this guy is really starting to get it, I'm very excited to see what he can put together. And with Grinch as kind of his leader, I think he's headed for something really special.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on this in that Bookie has gotten better since he got to Oklahoma, and that gets lost because people expected him to be great right away. 5-star billing, played a lot of corner at one of the best high school football programs in the country. IMG Academy is in USA Today's not only top 25, but the number one team in the country this year yet again. And after the stops that he had at Calabasas and then on all the way over to Florida to end up at Oklahoma after it looked like Nebraska was going to get in there to get him, he ends up not only coming to Oklahoma, but playing a position that he had not played in high school and was really learning on the fly. Got taken advantage of as a true freshman out in that slot. Never forget David Sills lining up over the top of him and Will Greer immediately seeing that and saying, okay, we're running the hot route now over the little guy. And then last year, right, we're talking about not just a pick against South Dakota, but a pick 6, and then a huge play to break up what could have been a game changer for Texas Christian, and he's on the tight end. He's on Pro Wells, and they wanted to do what David Sills had done, and he was able to break up that pass. In addition to being really the only guy that Grinch could trust at that nickel spot. And this year it's pivotal once again because Justin Harrington is hurt. You don't know what you got in Trey Norwood, but I feel like if we were allowed to think about Trey Norwood as a corner as opposed to a nickel, that might be helpful, though that doesn't necessarily speak volumes about what you think you have at cornerback. So from there, the other guys that you want to highlight, Deshaun White, right? Brian Asamoah, which shocked me to a degree. Patrick Fields, who we know about. Those guys are going to be Trey Brown, the backbone of his defense. And I think all of those except Brian Asamoah, I think we would have pinpointed. But with the injury to Caleb Kelly, we've been openly talking about who's going to play that will linebacker spot, and it sounds like Brian Asamoah is making it his, though David Ugwoegbu has moved over to inside as well, along with guys like Robert Barnes.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about what Brian can accomplish this season. But I think really the focal point here and what will ultimately determine Brian Asamoah's success is the success of one Deshaun White. And for Alex Grinch to kind of recognize what Deshaun is accomplishing in practice, not only from a play perspective, but from a leadership perspective, is a big deal for me. I mean, look, Kenneth Murray leaving the program, I still feel like that's a loss that still may be getting a little bit overlooked. I mean, the guy was obviously an incredible vocal leader. He was also very talented as an inside linebacker, but he was also a very good pass rusher. And so in three facets of the game, in a way, they lost a primary contributor. And Deshaun White, well, I don't think he'll need to fill all three. He's got to do at least two. And so for him to be showing early signs that he can do that, that is very important, especially for the future success of Alex Grinch and, of course, Brian Asamoah, because then he's allowed to feed off the success of Deshaun White and maybe play a little bit freer, which I think Brian's probably the more freestyle kind of athlete you play at linebacker, whereas Deshaun, you really bet on him to provide that structure that the inside linebacker position needs. So it was very encouraging for me to see Grinch identify two inside linebackers in his system that are practicing at a, quote, different level, especially when they're probably the two main guys that will be contributing this season, with some depth issues kind of perceived there, some new guys like Robert Barnes and Jamal Morris learning the position. So those two are going to be leaned on heavily, and I'm very excited about the fact they are getting identified early on as guys who are accepting the responsibility and taking it upon themselves to get better.
Yeah, I would fall into that as well. I mean, I want these guys to be great, if nothing else, but you also want to see the maturity come along. I mean, this is going to be Pat Fields' team, Trey Brown's team, and Bookie's team, but watching a guy like Deshaun White and what he's going to have to actually carry is it's no different than what Kenneth Murray Jr. had to do last year. And I was right about Kenneth Murray way back when he was a true freshman, and folks were saying, hey, look, I don't think this guy has it, and his junior season turned into not just a great season, but vaulted him into the first round of the NFL draft. I'm going to throw this to you because I'm going to already put it out there. I think that if Bookie has a great season, we're talking about him in very much the same sort of way. Now, his height's going to hold him back. We understand that. You want to see what he has to throw down in the 40, but I think he's a day two guy even today, and I think, that 5-star billing is going to follow him around, but being 5'8" to 5'10" isn't going to help him. So, one, do you think that Boogie could be that good? And two, do you think there's a first-round draft pick on this team, which is kind of leads me into, well, Ronnie Perkins, but I want to let you answer the question first.
Yeah, Ronnie Perkins could be a whole podcast in his own right. But as for Bookie Radley-Hiles, who, of course, another guy you could talk for hours and hours about, you ask the question, okay, is this guy an NFL draft pick? I think we talk a lot about, some of those interceptions that he created, right, last season or before, but also, obviously, some of the coverage mishaps that opposing teams have capitalized on when it comes to him. But for me, the biggest indicator that I have that Brendan Radley-Hiles could be a future NFL draft pick is a performance that literally no one discusses when it comes to him. But for me, it was probably one of, if not the biggest performance he put together all year. And that was the game against Oklahoma State, right? Where this guy is playing the nickelback position against a zone stretch running scheme. Chuba Hubbard is the number one running back in the country, no question about it, and looking to campaign for the Heisman. And Brendan Radley-Hiles is sitting there at the nickelback position. He must set the edge and contain the best running back in the nation. And what does he do? He puts up double-digit tackles and basically shuts down an Oklahoma State offense that hoped to run strictly through a zone stretch scheme going right at him. And that is what signals to me a guy who understands the ultimate responsibility of not just pass coverage, but the run game and what he must do fundamentally to uphold the other systematic influences of his defense. And I feel like if you really dissect a performance like that, then you add in some of those other indicators, right? Some of the interceptions he's been able to create, some of the big pass breakups. The tools are all there. And so for me, Brendan Radley-Hiles going into his junior season with the leadership of Alex Grinch definitely has the ability this year to put together something that gets his resume worthy of an NFL draft selection. I don't know when that would be. I still think we can all agree that maybe first, second round is a little too high to project right now. But, I mean, you got to feel like if he can put together some tackling performances like that game against Oklahoma State with some of those other interceptions or turnovers that he's created in the past, fourth round, fifth round could be a reasonable ceiling for him. And if the rumors are true that this guy is practicing at a different level, I think the biggest quote for me in Alex Grinch's thing today was, I see more commitment to technique when it comes to Bookie Radley-Hiles. If this guy just focuses on the fundamentals of the game and adds it all together with some of those standout performances he had last season, yeah, man, I think this guy is a draft selection. I feel like he could eventually put together some very solid career numbers in the NFL.